They say that the most exciting part of any great fighter's career is the time that they spend answering their critics en route to the top of their chosen division. I think there's a lot of merit to that claim. Even if the later pathway through consistent elite tests and super fights are what makes the sport great, it is the uncertainty of the initial climb that truly forges the connections that we end up retaining through a rising talent's peak years. Because no matter how much you think you know about an athlete and their strengths and weaknesses on paper, through watching the action inside that cage, you are opening yourself up to the possibility of being shocked. The possibility of learning something that goes in direct opposition to what you had previously believed. I'm not saying that I didn't think the prospect Khamzat Chimaev was anything less than his tremendous billing, but upon watching his 17-second destruction of Gerald Meerschaert, we all witnessed a truly terrifying facet of his game that understandably left a lot of us pretty surprised. Though just over 2 months into his UFC career, Khamzat has well and truly managed to make a name for himself, both through his actions inside the octagon and his undeniable charisma outside of it. 3 victories over 3 UFC caliber opponents is nothing to be scoffed at no matter what the circumstances. But as you would expect, it was the manner in which Chimaev bulldozed his way through each of these tests that truly made him into the sensation that he quickly became. Add into the equation the fact that he has fought 3 times in 2 months, and it's not hard to see why this guy is being seen as the whole package. And in a time where a set of quite frankly insane global circumstances had led to the closure of several major sporting organizations, there truly was an opening for a fighter like Chimaev to make his way into the spotlight. The UFC have been a lot shorter on options than they'd have you believe. Between the travel restrictions that now affect several of their biggest stars, as well as the ever-present concerns over the looming danger of a positive test that could derail an entire event at any moment, it's clearly not easy to be in Dana White's shoes right now. As much as it seems as though our regularly scheduled programming is continuing as planned, the reality is the UFC have been forced to take a major backstep on a huge number of their long-term plans for the year as a whole. Now dealing with a pool of fighters that may shrink at any given moment, there has been a certain level of madness to the way fights have been getting made these days. Remember that it took just 1 victory in 4 fights for the bantamweight contender Cody Garbrandt to be granted a shot at the flyweight title prior to his eventual pullout. Remember that we just watched Jose Aldo, a 0-1 bantamweight, fighting for the divisional belt ahead of less commercially viable contenders. It's a weird time to be a fight promoter, and based on what we're seeing from their matchmaking, there are a lot of fights being made from the highest to lowest levels based purely around availability, and even more so than normal. It's that whole idea of, are you available to jump into a camp to fight on 2 weeks' notice? So you want to be an ultimate fighter. And it's really not ideal for the UFC contracted athletes. I always want to see these fighters enjoy the best possible circumstances in order to allow them to compete to the best of their abilities. That whole notion of this isn't a career, this is an opportunity that was voiced by Dana White genuinely makes me worried for the future. But this is the landscape of the sport as we know it, and the UFC have done a tremendous job at making this the norm. And where there is a preferred route for the fighters in the eyes of the UFC, with that being said, the existence of this as the status quo means that there is a gap for someone to truly take advantage of. Khamzat Chimaev has forced his way into the UFC's good books by playing the game exactly how they want it to be played. That willingness to fight has seen him already take on a very unique position within the promotion. After 2 short months, we're already kind of looking at maybe 5 potential fights under his belt before the year is out, and that's a conservative estimate. Fans love his willingness, his recklessness, and his fearlessness, but above all other things, Khamzat Chimaev seems to have the one crucial ingredient that will stand to him in his pursuit of the sport's upper levels. He is very clearly a special talent. Now look, as I said before, we're in the most exciting portion of Khamzat's rise, the point in which everything still remains a bit up in the air. But what we do know so far is that Chimaev's game is well developed enough to allow him to completely dominate solid competition in a fashion that is so completely and utterly one-sided that the bouts seemed like little more than warm-ups for the Russian. John Phillips was a very fitting debut test, an incredibly powerful fighter who, while not being fully comfortable on the ground, did at least allow us to get some idea of how Khamzat would deal with a stylistically favourable matchup. And deal with it he did. If I remember correctly, one of the judges sitting cage side had that first round as a 10-7, a margin so rare and impressive in the UFC that it doesn't really matter who it is who you've been able to record one against. To do that in your UFC debut against a veteran of 4 promotional outings was a pretty stunning opener, make no mistake. I've always kept my ear close to the ground when it comes to cage warriors, and in particular, the growth of the MMA scene in my home country of Ireland. Rhys McKee for a few years now has been seen as one of our finest up-and-coming talents. A title that is still very much in place despite him being matched up with an absolute killer in his UFC debut. I've heard that Rhys will get another chance to prove himself, and for that I am glad. But even with that loss to Khamzat on his record, trust me when I say that McKee is a very promising addition to the UFC's welterweight roster. Although I do believe that lightweight will be his best route, as it was the division in which he did a lot of his best work prior to signing with the UFC. All that victory did was prove to me that Khamzat is deserving of the hype. There's only so much you can do with your first 3 or 4 UFC outings. People are going to question you, they're going to write you off for having not fought the elite of the elite yet. And in that victory over McKee, as well as his 17-second destruction of the veteran Gerald Meerschaert, Chimaev managed to squeeze every single bit of success he could out of those bookings. We knew that his wrestling, his top control, and his ground and pound were of a high quality, and though questions about his overall aptitude for the subtleties of striking technique and footwork remain, we do now have conclusive proof that Khamzat Chimaev hits like a truck. At 26 years old, time is well and truly on his side, and with him now seemingly tied into such a lofty schedule, chances are we will learn even more about him before too long. At this point in time, I'd like to see Khamzat deal with a high-level striker with good takedown defense who will test his cardio, or a crafty guard player who can offer up dangers from his back. But make no mistake, I'm fully on board this hype train. It is always a dangerous game to play when there are so many unknowns, sure, but that's what makes this sport so fascinating, right? He might not have the resume to justify the incredible levels of attention just yet, but there is absolutely no denying that he has risen to every challenge he has found before him with a masterful level of skill and an infectious level of swagger. I can't say with any degree of certainty that Khamzat will live up to his potential, but for now, what I've seen so far is more than enough to make me extremely excited for his next outing. The wonder and awe that comes about from watching a talent like this progress is just too much fun to pass up on, I'm afraid. Prospects like these are why I love this sport, so I'm in. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all of our latest uploads. And as always, thank you for watching.